I had just locked the front door, keys still warm in my hand, when I heard Claire call my name from across the hedge. The sun was painting long shadows on the street, and all I had on my mind was the grocery list waiting in my purse. But Claire's voice, it carried something hesitant, almost like she was standing on the edge of a secret she wasn't sure she should tell. I gave her a polite smile, but inside I felt a sudden knot twist in my stomach. That look in her eyes wasn't casual. It was heavy, like she was about to hand me something I hadn't asked for. "Marie," she said softly, glancing around as if the street itself might be listening. "My husband told me not to say this. He said you're going through a hard time and you wanted to keep it private. But if you need anything, I'm here." Her words fell between us like stones dropped into still water, rippling through me. I froze on the step, my keys clutched too tight in my hand. A hard time? What hard time? Her tone didn't match the normal neighborly concern. It carried the weight of something already decided about me. I forced out a small laugh, the kind you give when you're covering nerves. "What are you talking about, Claire? A hard time with what?" I asked, my voice sounding calmer than I felt. Inside, though, I felt as though someone had cracked open a door in my life I didn't even know was there. The air between us thickened, and I caught her shifting her weight, looking down like she wasn't sure she should go on. That pause alone sent a chill down my spine, and I braced myself, waiting for the words that would change everything. Claire finally lifted her gaze, her eyes darting like she was choosing between silence and betrayal. "My husband saw Paul at the market," she said carefully, almost whispering. "He wasn't alone. There was another woman with him. And Paul told my husband that you two were separating. He said you wanted to go through it quietly, without anyone asking questions." The words slammed into me like a door slamming shut in my face. My breath caught, and for a moment, I swear the world tilted under my feet. Separating? Without my knowledge? I blinked hard, trying to process what she had just said. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped it in iron bands. "Separating?" I repeated, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay composed. "He never told me a single thing, Claire." My mind scrambled, flipping through every conversation, every glance, every mundane moment in the last weeks, searching for a clue. And suddenly, all those late nights, the excuses, the vague smiles when I asked questions, they began to stitch themselves together into something far more sinister. Claire's hand twitched like she wanted to reach for mine, but she hesitated, unsure if she had just destroyed my world or saved me from ignorance. I managed a shaky smile, though inside I was boiling with disbelief and rising anger. "Thank you, Claire," I whispered, my voice rough. I needed to hear this. Truly. I straightened my shoulders, though my knees felt weak. Right then, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If Paul thought he could weave lies behind my back, I'd make sure those lies unraveled right in front of him. I walked away from Claire's hedge with my grocery list still tucked in my purse, but the market was the last place on my mind. Each step home felt heavier, as if I were dragging chains I didn't know I'd been wearing. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the fire sparking inside me. Betrayal wasn't new in the world. I'd seen friends suffer it, neighbors whisper about it, but now it had landed on my doorstep, wearing my husband's face. The air around me seemed sharper, every sound too loud, every breath too shallow. Inside, the house looked exactly the same, shoes by the door, the faint smell of coffee from the morning, the calm quiet of a marriage that was supposed to be safe. But everything was different now, fractured, false. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood, hearing Claire's words echo like a broken record. Paul at the market. Another woman. Separation. A script written without me, starring me as the fool. My stomach churned as if even my body was rejecting the lie I'd been living. I pressed my palms flat against the table, grounding myself. "He thinks I don't know," I murmured, the sound barely more than breath. But I did know. And that knowledge was power. For the first time in years, I felt a current of determination pulse through me. If Paul had painted me as fragile, broken, in need of pity, then he was about to learn just how wrong he was. And I already knew the first question I'd ask him when he walked through that door tonight. That night, I waited for Paul like someone waits for a storm, tense, restless, listening for every sound that might signal its arrival. The house was dim, the clock ticking louder than usual, each second drawing me closer to the moment I'd confront him. I rehearsed the words in my head, but my heart still pounded as if it were trying to escape. When I finally heard his keys jingle at the door, I straightened in my chair, the picture of calm I didn't feel. He walked in casually, humming under his breath, as if nothing in the world could touch him. He kissed the air in my direction and dropped a bag of groceries on the counter. "So, Paul," I said, my tone steady but sharp enough to cut glass, "how was the market the other day?" He didn't even flinch. He just shrugged, unpacking fruit like it was the most ordinary question in the world. "Oh, just the usual groceries. Why?" His nonchalance was almost insulting. I leaned forward, folding my hands slowly, my eyes fixed on him. "Strange," I said, letting the word linger, "because Claire's husband saw you there, with another woman." That was the first time his mask cracked. He froze mid-motion, the apple slipping slightly in his hand. For a split second, his eyes betrayed him, wide, startled, before he forced a laugh. "What? That's ridiculous. People make up stories. You know how gossip spreads." His words fell flat, and I could almost taste the lie in the air. I tilted my head, studying him the way you study a stranger who pretends to know your name. My lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the kind he'd ever seen from me before. "Funny," I said softly, almost like it was a joke, "how the gossip included you saying we're separating. News to me, Paul." His face drained of color, and he stumbled over his words. I don't know where that came from. People hear what they want to hear." His voice was sharp now, defensive, like a cornered animal. The tension thickened, wrapping itself around the room until even the silence buzzed with electricity. He set the apple down too hard, the sound echoing louder than it should have. "You can't actually believe this nonsense," he snapped. But the way his eyes darted, the quickness of his breath, those told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't defending himself. He was scrambling. And the more he scrambled, the clearer his guilt became. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms as if I had all the time in the world. My calmness rattled him more than any scream ever could. "Don't worry, Paul," I said, my voice even. "I don't have to believe the gossip. I'll just find out the truth myself." That hit him like a dart to the chest. He shoved the bag of groceries aside, muttering something about being tired of this conversation, and stormed off toward the bedroom. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. I had all the confirmation I required, and now I knew exactly what to do next. I sat there long after he slammed the bedroom door, the silence of the house pressing against my ears. My hands rested on the table, steady now, though my chest was a storm. Every excuse he had just thrown at me replayed in my mind, flimsy and transparent. He thought storming off would end the conversation, but he had no idea. It had only just begun. His arrogance had given me permission to start digging, and once I started, there'd be no stopping. I poured myself a glass of water, the clink of the ice echoing in the quiet. My reflection in the kitchen window stared back at me, a mix of pain and determination. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, if he thinks he can humiliate me, he's about to learn who he married. And for the first time since Claire's words, I felt a spark of control ignite inside me. It was small, fragile, but it was mine. That flame would only grow stronger. Upstairs, I heard the floorboards creak as Paul paced the bedroom, probably rehearsing his next lie. Let him build his little fortress of denial. Because while he played at hiding, I would be uncovering. While he thought he was clever, I would be collecting. I didn't know yet exactly what I'd find, but I knew this. The truth was waiting, and I was ready to meet it head on. The next days felt like walking through a fog, but beneath it, my focus was razor sharp. I studied Paul the way you study a stranger, watching every move, every glance at his phone, every excuse to step outside. He thought I was still stunned, still clinging to his story, but I was just waiting waiting for the moment when his carelessness would hand me the truth. And that moment came on an ordinary evening, while the shower ran upstairs. I slipped his phone from the nightstand, my fingers trembling, my breath caught in my throat. For years, I had trusted that man with my whole life, never once feeling the need to snoop. But trust was gone now, replaced with cold determination. The screen lit up and my chest tightened as I scrolled. Then, like a slap in the face, the words appeared. "Can't wait to be free of her. Our weekend will be perfect." My heart dropped, then hardened into stone. The bile rose in my throat, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. Each message was another knife, jokes at my expense, plans whispered to someone who wasn't me, fantasies of a future without the woman cooking his dinners and washing his clothes. I snapped screenshots, my hands steadier now, as if every cruel word gave me new strength. I wasn't just a wife anymore, I was an investigator, and I had just found my first piece of undeniable evidence. I emailed the screenshots to myself, a trail he could never erase, and then printed copies at the office the next morning. The sound of the printer spitting out those sheets felt like justice in motion. Each page was a piece of armor, a shield against the lies he had wrapped around me. I slid them into a folder, tucked it under my arm, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was walking taller. His betrayal had wounded me, yes, but it had also armed me. At work, no one knew I was hiding a war plan inside my bag. I sat in meetings, nodded at small talk, while under the table my fingers traced the edge of the folder like a secret weapon. When I got home, I hid it in the back of my closet, beneath sweaters I rarely touched. Let him think I was still blind, still docile. That illusion was my greatest advantage now, the power of knowing while he thought I didn't. It was intoxicating. That night I lay in bed next to him, his breathing deep and even while my mind raced. He dreamed of her, maybe, but I dreamed of something bigger, not just exposing him, but taking back everything he thought he could strip away from me. If he wanted a separation, fine, but it would be on my terms, my voice, my choice, my battlefield. And he would never see it coming. Every time Paul picked up his phone after that, I watched him differently. I no longer saw a husband scrolling through meaningless apps. I saw a liar clutching the rope that would hang him. The shower running, the doorbell ringing. Even his short trips to the garage became opportunities for me to gather more. The pieces of his double life were falling into my lap, and I collected them carefully, like shards of glass that would soon cut him. I started writing everything down, dates, times, excuses he gave. The more I documented, the clearer the picture became. His lies lined up in neat little rows on my notebook, every inconsistency proof of the truth I already held in my folder. And with each entry, I felt less like a victim and more like a strategist, the architect of an ending he couldn't rewrite. He thought I was passive, but he was building the stage for his own downfall. One night, while he scrolled beside me in bed, chuckling at whatever lie he was feeding her, I whispered to myself, "If he thinks he'll humiliate me, he's in for a surprise." The words tasted like steel, solid and cold. I turned out the light, my heart steady. Tomorrow, the plan would move forward. Tomorrow, I'd stop being the woman who didn't know, and start being the woman who would make him regret ever underestimating me. I set the table like it was any other night, but this time every detail was deliberate. His favorite meal simmered on the stove, the candles flickered softly, and the wine glasses sparkled under the dim light. To him, it would look like love. To me, it was the stage for truth. My hands didn't shake as I laid out the silverware. Instead, I felt calm, steady, even powerful. This wasn't a dinner. It was a reckoning. When Paul walked in, he smelled the roast and smiled, smug and satisfied. "Well, this is a surprise," he said, slipping off his jacket. He kissed the air near my cheek, the same hollow gesture I'd grown to recognize as routine, not affection. I smiled back, a perfect mask. "I thought we could enjoy a nice dinner together," I said sweetly. He had no idea that the sweetness in my voice was laced with poison. We sat down, the clinking of cutlery filling the silence at first. He poured himself wine, his arrogance thick in the way he leaned back as if he owned the room. I let him settle into the comfort of the illusion. Then, I looked across the table and tilted my head, my smile sharpening. "So, Paul," I said lightly, "how's the process of separation going? I'd love to hear the details." His fork clattered against the plate, eyes darting up to meet mine. "Marie, what are you—" he started, but I cut him off by sliding the folder across the table. The sharp scrape of it against the wood was louder than his words. His face drained as he saw the papers spill out, screenshots of his texts, messages dripping with betrayal. "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice steady, sharp as a blade. "These are your words. These are your lies. You paraded another woman in public, told people I was broken, told them we were done." He shoved his chair back, standing so quickly the glass of wine tipped and bled across the tablecloth. "You went through my phone?" he roared, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "You had no right." The irony nearly made me laugh. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded, letting him unravel. "And you had no right to betray me," I replied coolly. My calmness was gasoline on his fire, and he knew it. His hands trembled as he tried to gather the papers, his voice breaking between anger and panic. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Marie. It's not what it looks like." But the evidence between us spoke louder than his desperate pleas. I watched him flail, a man drowning in his own lies, and felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one cornered. He was, and I intended to keep him there. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with deliberate calm. "You paraded her around the market, Paul. Told people I was falling apart. Do you know what that makes you?" My voice was low, but it cut through his shouting like glass. He opened his mouth, but no excuse came out this time. Only silence, the kind that strips a man bare. I pointed at the papers still scattered between us. "That's who you are now. Not my husband, not my partner, just a liar who mistook my silence for weakness." The room was tense, the air thick with his rage, but beneath it all I felt strangely free. Watching him stammer, red-faced and desperate, was like watching a mask crumble. Every excuse he tried to form collapsed before it reached me. His power, the hold he thought he had, was gone. He just didn't realize it yet. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to sit in the ruins of his performance. Finally, I took the wine glass he had ignored and raised it slightly, meeting his eyes. "It's over, Paul," I said, calm and final. "And you'll learn soon enough what that really means." I left him standing there, fists clenched, his voice trapped in his throat. Upstairs, I could hear my own heartbeat steady, strong. Tonight wasn't the end, it was only the spark. The real fire was still to come. The next morning I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I walked into my lawyer's office with the folder of evidence pressed tight against my chest like a shield. The air inside smelled faintly of old leather and fresh ink, a place where battles were fought with paper and signatures. My lawyer flipped through the texts, his brow lifting higher with every page. "This is solid," he said, tapping the stack. "You'll get the house, the assets. He won't have a leg to stand on." Those words tasted sweeter than any promise Paul had ever made. Filing the divorce papers felt like setting down a heavy stone I'd carried too long. Every signature was a release. Every line I initialed a boundary carved in stone. I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was reclaiming myself. I thought of Paul's smug face at the dinner table, his arrogance, his panic when the papers hit the wood. Soon he would feel that panic again. Only this time, in a courtroom. When I came home that evening, Paul was waiting, pacing like a man about to lose something he still thought he owned. "Marie, don't do this," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "We can work it out." I set my purse down calmly, my keys clinking against the counter. "You already worked it out with her, Paul," I said, my voice firm. "This is me working it out for myself." The look on his face told me he finally understood. The power had shifted, and it was never coming back to him. The courtroom was colder than I expected, yet I sat there wrapped in a quiet fire. Paul tried to keep his composure, But every time the texts were read aloud, his shoulders sank a little lower. The whispers of witnesses, neighbors who had seen him flaunting his affair, cut through whatever defense he had left. I didn't need to speak much. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Watching his lies unravel under the weight of truth was more satisfying than I imagined. When the judge declared the house and assets mine, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Paul's face was a portrait of shock, his mouth half open as though he thought charm could still save him. But charm can't rewrite betrayal. I stood, collected my folder, and walked past him without a word. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was steady, deliberate, a victory march in disguise. Outside, the sunlight felt different, brighter, warmer. I called Claire, the very woman who had unknowingly lit the fuse. "It's done," I told her simply. She didn't need details. She could hear the strength in my voice. Paul had always painted me as fragile, weak, unable to stand without him. But today proved what I'd known in my heart since the moment I saw those texts. I wasn't the one losing. He was. Paul came to me one last time, his pride shattered, his voice a mixture of anger and begging. "Marie, please, don't leave me with nothing," he said, his eyes darting like a man trapped in his own cage. I looked at him, this man who once promised me forever, and I felt nothing but a hollow kind of pity. "You built this, Paul," I told him calmly. "Brick by brick, lie by lie. Now you get to live in the ruins." His lips trembled, but I turned away, done giving him pieces of myself. The day he left, suitcase in hand, the silence that followed wasn't sad. It was liberating. The house was mine, but more importantly, so was my peace. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, as if reclaiming territory stolen from me. For the first time in years, the air felt light. No more secrets, no more stage smiles, just me, and the freedom I had wrestled back with my own hands. That night, I stood by the window, glass of wine in hand, watching the world outside glow under the streetlights. I whispered to myself, not out of bitterness, but out of victory. He thought I was broken, but I was only waiting to rise. And I knew then that my story wasn't about losing him. It was about finding myself. What came next was mine to create, and I would never again let anyone write it for me. Months later, my home felt alive again. The rooms no longer echoed with tension. Instead, they carried laughter, music, and the hum of voices I trusted. That evening, I hosted a small neighborhood dinner, something I hadn't done in years. The table was full, the air warm with the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread, and the clinking of glasses rang like a celebration. For once, the smile on my face wasn't forced. It was real, born from a peace I'd fought hard to earn. Claire leaned toward me, her eyes soft but curious. "You look happier than ever, Marie," she said with a grin, her words full of genuine affection. I squeezed her hand, grateful for the honesty that had started this entire journey. "Because I learned something important," I told her, raising my glass high enough for the room to hear. "I'd rather live alone with dignity than with someone who lives a lie." My words settled in the room, heavy yet liberating, met with nods and quiet applause. As I looked around, I felt a surge of pride, not for what I had lost, but for what I had gained. Freedom, respect, myself. Paul's name was now just a whisper in the neighborhood, a cautionary tale told in hushed tones. But me? I was no longer just Marie, the wife he betrayed. I was Marie, the woman who rose from the ashes of deceit, stronger than anyone had ever expected. As the night unfolded, I found myself laughing freely, the kind of laughter that shakes loose the dust of old wounds. Every story shared, every clink of glass reminded me that life didn't end with betrayal. It restarted. I caught myself looking around the table, realizing that the people gathered here weren't just neighbors. They had become my circle, my support, the ones who saw me not as broken, but as rebuilt. That realization was more healing than any apology Paul could have ever offered. Later, while clearing plates, Claire slipped beside me in the kitchen. "You know," she whispered with a smile, "the day I told you what my husband saw, I was scared I'd hurt you, but now, I think it saved you." Her words made my throat tighten, but in the best way. I hugged her, feeling the strength of friendship in that simple embrace. "You did save me, Claire," I said quietly. "You gave me the truth, and with it, the chance to start over." When I stepped back into the dining room, I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet. My eyes looked brighter, my posture taller. I barely recognized the woman I had been months ago, the one who lived under shadows, waiting for answers that never came. That version of me was gone. In her place stood a woman who had faced the storm and walked out untouched by its ruin. A woman who had found her voice again. When the last guest left and the house grew quiet, I stood by the doorway, letting the silence wrap around me like a warm blanket. It wasn't the heavy silence of secrets anymore. It was peace. I poured myself one final glass of wine and walked out to the porch, breathing in the cool night air. The stars shimmered above me, steady and eternal, and for the first time in a long while, I felt steady too. Paul's name no longer stirred anger in me. It was just a memory, distant and small, like a shadow fading with the sunset. What lingered instead was pride. Pride that I hadn't crumbled, that I had fought back with truth and walked away with everything that mattered, my home, my dignity, and myself. I had discovered that strength isn't born from avoiding pain, it's born from facing it head-on and refusing to let it define you. As I lifted my glass to the night, I whispered, "Here's to new beginnings." The words weren't bitter, they were hopeful. Tomorrow, I would wake in a house that was truly mine, surrounded by people who valued me, with a heart no longer bound by lies. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew with unshakable certainty, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, stronger, freer. Finally, me.